Welcome to the Big Woods Bucks podcast. I'm your host, Hal Blood. Sitting here today with my co-host, Lee Shands.
Hello there.
A.K.A. Good Lee.
We'll go with that.
Yeah. And before we get started, just a little housekeeping there. And appreciate you all listening in or watching on YouTube, however you're getting us. But just a reminder that this podcast is for you people out there that want to listen and tune in. And we want to know what you think about our podcast. If you have any comments, if you want us to cover some subjects, we want to do that because we want this to be for what you want to learn about or know about or whatever. So any suggestions, you can send those to email Scott at bigwoodsbucks.com, and we'll do our best to get through everybody's suggestions or whatever. And then on that topic, we're also we have two podcasts. We have our Big Woods Bucks podcast, of course, here, and then we also have the Adirondack podcast, and they're both through Big Woods Bucks. But if you want to subscribe, you can get them both on our YouTube channel. But if you get them through Apple or iTunes and Spotify or the other ways, you'll have to subscribe to both of them separately. So anyways, you can come and do that. Also, for any other information, it's all on the website. If there's something you miss on here or want to know about something, just go to bigwoodsbucks.com and there's more information there. That's where I have our storefront if you need to buy something and all of that. So anyways, we're going to start on with today's podcast is going to be it's a suggestion from an email. We'll give a shout out to Todd Kellum. Put the spectacles on. Todd Kellum, and he's from Pennsylvania. And no, he's from Michigan. Sorry about that. And he's got pretty good list of questions here, and they're actually quite good. And I responded back to him, and I told him, I said, appreciate that, because it's probably, sometimes we don't know really what people are interested in. You know, we kind of do what we think you are, but we're gonna try to, me and Lee will try to hammer out a lot of these questions here. And the first one would be, and he has a lot of them, so bear with us, we'll try to get them all. How many rifles, other than the 760, Remington 760, 7600s, and the Savage, have you and Lee killed deer with? I'm going to let Lee start off with that. I think we talked about it a little bit on some other ones, but...
Yeah, I probably didn't settle down into one as quick as you did. I know probably ever since you got your 7600, you've killed most of your deer with that 7600, but I loved guns so much, and I've killed the majority of my deer with a Savage 99, and most of those were either the 250 Savage with heavy hand loads or a 308 99. But I was thinking when you told me about this question, I've killed deer with a 250 Savage, a 270 Winchester, a 280 Remington, a 7x57 Mauser, a 30-30, a 300 Savage, a 308 Winchester, a 30-06, 32 Special, 35 Whalen, and 45-70. So I've killed with a lot of different cartridges. And then with rifles, I've killed them. Again, most of them were lever guns. I've always been a lever gun guy, but I also killed a fair amount. I like Winchester pre-64 Model 70s and 98 Mausers. So I've killed a fair amount of deer with the Model 70 Winchester pre-64s, different calibers.
I guess you've just proven something.
What's that?
It ain't the caliber or the style of the rifle. It's the guy behind it.
It's the guy behind it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they're all good. It's just, I think, you know, you start somewhere. Like I started with my model 94 3030. My grandfather had, passed it to my father, passed it to me. And I killed my first 2 deer with that. And then I think we might have talked about it before, but then my father's cousin gave me a model 721 Remington 270, and I killed a lot of deer with that. But I was using that when I started back before I started coming north, and then I actually continued with that gun for the first 7 years up north. I used that gun, and then I tried a 7400 once, .6. I bought it cheap from a friend's father. I think I paid $100 for it. Of course, I was back in the early 80s, and I didn't like how it carried. It was a, semi-automatic. It didn't feel like it carried right and stuff. And
they're heavier up front.
Yeah,
they're quite a lot heavier than a 7600.
Yeah, so I decided to try the pump, so when I went and got the pump, 7600, I bought the first year carbine there, and once I did that, I just liked the way it carried. It seemed to be like a pound lighter than the semi, and it shot good. Put the Peep sight on it, shot good, and that's what I hunted with from 1989 on. But I've killed some with muzzleloaders too. That's the only other thing that
I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, because I hunted a lot of times. Just muzzleloader season was the only time I got to hunt, and I've tried a bunch of different muzzleloaders because they've evolved over time. From my first old smoke pole Hawken rifle I built, and till the last one I bought was the Woodman Arm. But so. I guess it's a preference, but I just tell people the reason I settled in on the 7600 was because I think one of the reasons was even when I had the 3030, I didn't particularly care for the lever action, and I don't know why that was. It just, maybe for me, it wasn't as smooth to operate or easy to operate. I mean, it seemed like it was when I was a kid. I remember shooting at deer down at the relative's lodge. I'd sound like the rifleman there, spitting them out, and never could hit nothing if they were running. But I always, started back when I was in the Marine Corps in the 70s. I bought an 870 pump, and so I just figured I was using that, shooting ducks with it and everything else. So it was a natural transition to the other pump. So, and then I'd heard, I'd read Larry's book back when I was a teenager too, and the Benoits were using them, and I said, well, it's probably a pretty good rifle, so that's what I went to. And as far as the caliber, back then, when they came out with that carbine, it was the only caliber they made it in at first. In the late 80s, it was the first year one, and then they went on to make some other calibers. But so I started with that .6. I knew it was a good cartridge, and I never changed. But I've always been kind of a creature of habit that way. I don't switch up guns. Once I get used to something, it's like it becomes the extension of your arm, I guess. But here's a few words from our sponsors. They're all top-notch people. We're glad to have them aboard. Make sure you support them. That's what keeps us going. Being the low-tech guy I am, there's one thing I've learned to embrace with technology, and it's my Onyx. I used to carry maps and GPS when it finally came out and stuff, but the Onyx has eliminated that because I've got my GPS in my phone now with my Onyx app. I can mark everything in that. It's helpful that I can show other people by putting a pin in if I want to send somebody to a place. Being a guide, that's important, I can give them the pin, put it in there, I text it to them, whatever. So if you want to get your Onyx, get your Big Woods Bucks code, BWB, and get you 20% off, but I highly recommend it. Give you a little update. Skinner Sights. We all know they're the best sight going, but it's a great company because Andy and the crew there are innovative, and they're always thinking up either new models to make a sight for, improve the sights, making mounts for scopes, and now they've come on with their own line of scopes and red dots. Whatever Andy does in the company, it's top-notch, first quality, and they stand behind everything, and we're glad to have them as a partner, and we hope you'll try their sights, and you can trust your life with those, and they're going to get you the game. So get your Skinner Sights, and you can trust me that you're going to be glad you did. Just wanted to talk a little bit about minus 33 and the wool they have, which I believe is best wool going. Whether it's base layers or your socks or whatever you're wearing, you got to have wool. I've been stressing that for people for years, to wear your wool, whether it's the outerwear or even your base layers and socks. I've been to the tour of the plant, see how they make their socks, and it's quality, the fit is right, and they're going to be long lasting. I've got socks I've had now for several years, and they look like I'll have them for several years more before they even think about wearing out. So I trust my life to wool, and you can too. Minus 33. All right, back to the podcast.
You had mentioned about your 870, and, we talked about rifles and rifle cartridges, but you and I have shot a fair amount of deer with an 870 pump 12 gauge too, especially you when you were down in the Carolinas. But
yeah, buckshot. That's what we had to use by law. Had to use buckshot on the base.
Which probably I tell people all the time. I think probably on those smaller deer down south, double-aught buck was probably good. But I shot a couple of big bucks up here in Maine when I was a teenager with double-aught buck, and they were pretty close. But I think on smaller deer, it's probably got enough knockdown power. But in my experience anyway, both of the big bucks that I shot with buckshot had to be, shot more than once and chased a little bit. I think probably if you had a slug, a 3-inch slug, and they're up close, I think a 12-gauge 3-inch slug will lay a buck down pretty good. But I don't think buckshot's really got the power for our big northern. You take a 200-pound buck, they'll carry some lead.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into that too with a smaller diameter caliber rifles too. But the other part of his question was, do the other team members, are they all kind of stuck on one particular? And I know a lot of the guys switch guns around a little bit. You know what I mean? Maybe not. I think everybody kind of has their favorite, whether it's a lever or a pump or whatever. But I know some of the guys switch them around a little bit, but I just, like I said, I've been a creature of habit, and I tell people, maybe you can get used to a lot of different ones, but if you go from one gun to the next, to me, maybe it's just the way my mind is, it's sometimes it might take you a split second difference in getting the safety off because you're remembering which gun you have in your hand that day, and a lot of times a split second means whether you're going to get a shot or not,
Yeah. Well, for me, it's like you were talking about familiarity. Because I'm a lefty, I love Savage 99s, and I've got a bunch of the older ones with the lever safety, but that's cumbersome for a left-handed person. So my deer gun, like the one that last year I shot my buck with a 99 and 308, just because the reason why I didn't have my 250 was Andy Larson had sent me up a couple of those new 1-4 Skinner scopes that he wanted us to try. And I had a 99 308 with the top tang safety. It's the one that I shot my big buck up in Ontario that one time that we went to Kenora. I shot a buck up there with it. And then when Stephen got back from the Marine Corps, I gave it to him. And it didn't have a scope on it. So I said, well, why don't you give me that 308 with the top tang safety, because it's just like my 250, only it's different caliber. So I put that low-powered scope on it, and I carry it around all year with a scope down on 2 power, so I'd have a wide field of view, because I'm used to mostly hunting with a Peep sight. But the reason why I started this conversation was my 99s, the ones that I hunt with most of the time, have a top tang safety, And my Model 70 Winchesters, the safe it's a little bit further forward, but it's the same thing. You just push it forward with your thumb. So it's really not that much difference on those Model 70s and the Model 99s. The safety's right back on top of your thumb, and you just push it forward to shoot. So that never was really big issue for me.
Yeah. Well, I'm a lefty too. We're the only ones in our right mind, I think. But a hammer, safety, or anything's ambidextrous. But you always could, and you still can. I from the beginning, I changed all my safeties over to left-handed, and so it's just natural to do it that way. But when I was shooting the 721, even though the safety's on the right-hand side, it's still easy to get to. If you got your thumb around your pistol grip, it's right there for your thumb. Right. It's not like it's out of place or anything. I never had any trouble with that. And then mine was a right-handed bolt, and I was a teenager, I just learned how to operate it, I didn't, normally people with a bolt action, they're going to, just rack it, rack the bolt with your hand, with your trigger hand. And I didn't do it that way. I just dropped, when I was shooting the right-handed one, all I would do was I didn't take it out of my shoulder. I just, when I'd fire and I would drop my right hand down, operated the bolt like this, and right back, when I went back, I was right back onto it. And that's how I shot. And I learned to do that. And
I'm the same way. A lot of people have mentioned, like, if they saw my moose videos, because I shot my main moose in 2020 with my Ruger bolt action 35 Whelen, and then I took it the next year to Alaska, and a bunch of people mentioned, I never seen anybody operate a bolt that way. And I said, it's because I'm a lefty and I learned to, but I hold the gun with my left hand. It never leaves my shoulder, and I just operate it with my right hand. And people commented, I can shoot a right-handed bolt action fast.
Yeah, I can too. That's why I don't think I could take a left-handed bolt and operate it right, because both of us have used them, the right-handed ones. It would actually be uncoordinated to try to do it that way.
I think I'm convinced in my own mind that I can shoot a right-handed bolt faster than a left-handed bolt.
Oh, I'm sure I can too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So getting into calibers, I guess, we talk about it all the time, and I guess it depends where you live, in the country, because we have big deer up here. So plus we also have thick woods, right? So that's two things to think about for a caliber. People like to argue about the calibers. Mainly it's where you hit them, right, Lee?
Right.
I don't care what you got for a gun, what you got for a caliber. If you don't hit them right, you're going to wound them, they're going to run off. You're not going to get them. So, but a lot of people, they think like, oh yes, 243 is the best deer caliber and whatever. There's always going to be an argument about it, but I don't argue about it with people. It's just that everything will kill a deer. I mean, you could kill a deer with a 22 rimfire if you hit them right. But I always tell people, it's so hard to hunt anyways in the big woods. It's so much harder. There's fewer deer. You're going to get way fewer opportunities even at a buck. Why would you handicap yourself any further, right? It's kind of like you got to play the odds. You want the odds in your favor. And if you start getting down into smaller diameter bullets that are moving fast, every twig they hit's going to knock them off. It's to try to get one through the brush, which you don't see most of it anyways. We already know that. You think a deer's standing in the open, you shoot at it, you get down there and you shot through 50 yards of whippets. But so that on top of, a big bodied deer, the bones are heavier, the muscles more, they're not going to penetrate as well. Or if they do, if you punch them behind the shoulder, which I don't care for that shot in the woods, but usually them fast ones just blow right through and they don't open up, huh?
Yeah, a lot of it's the bullets that kill anyway. It's not it's not how fast it's going or what the chart says for muzzle energy. It's the bullets that kill it. I tell people, and I'm honest about it, I love a 99 Savage, but the reason why I've killed most of my deer with the 250 was it was the first 99 Savage that I had with that top tank safety. But I hand load for mine. I hand load the heaviest bullets you can get and the best bullets you can get. I hand load 120 grain nozzle petitions. So in a 25 caliber, 120 grains a pretty heavy bullet. And so I've had good luck. I've shot a bunch of big deer with those 120 grain nozzle petitions. But I tell people, you're better off if you can find one. If you want a 99 Savage and you're looking for one, if you're right-handed, it doesn't matter where the safety is. But if you're a lefty, there's more of them out there in 308. And I tell people, your best option, especially now since the pandemic, ammunition is so hard to come by. If you want to get something that's you can afford to shoot now, a 308, 30-06, 30-30, those are the guns that, you can go into Walmart and for 25 or 30 bucks, you can buy a bunch of bullets. And there's something to be said for shooting your gun a lot and getting used to it. You're going to make a way better shot. I'd rather have, if a guy can't afford to shoot his 338 or whatever, and he's scared to death of it anyway, he'd be better off to buy a 30-30 or a 308 and shoot it all the time and be better with it, right? So I did that with Steven when I got his first 99 Savage, and Steven's a righty, so the safety didn't matter to him, but I wanted to get him a 99 Savage carbine. And almost all those old carbines, because they made them up into the 40s, but most of them are from the 20s and 30s. Most of them are 303 Savage, which it's about the same thing as a 30-30, but the ammunition costs you 2 or 3 times as much, and it's harder to get. So I looked around until I could find one for Steven in a 30-30. And back when he started hunting, when he was 10, you could go to Walmart and buy 170 grain Remington Corlocks for $9.99.
Yeah.
So I'd buy 3 boxes of those. And in September and October, I owned a bunch of land. We'd go out in the woods, and I had like targets set up in the woods, and I'd have him shoot at least a box or 2 boxes of 30-30 through that gun before the season. And then he still had a box of 170 grain Remington Corlocks for deer season. And I wanted him to shoot all the time. And again, a 30-30 is not a long range cartridge. It ain't something that you'd want to take out west or anything, but inside of 100 yards where we're shooting them, I think those 170 grain Remington Corlocks, they punch a good hole in a deer. And, the 06 or a 308's more, but whatever, shoot your gun a lot and make sure you got some decent bullets.
Yeah. But anybody that hasn't hunted here or something, I always told my hunters back from the time I started guiding, and I saw a lot of mishaps over the years, whether it was bear or moose or deer, but I would always tell people, just start at like 277 millimeter and up in caliber. Not to say anything less. I've already said, if you start getting less than that, and I know your 250 Savage is less, but it's different if you have a caliber that's a little lighter, but you got the experience to shoot with it. But anybody starting out, don't handicap yourself. Get a 270, 7 millimeter on up, 30 caliber, even if you want to get up into the 45 70s, it's all great. And you can use that same gun for deer, bear, and moose. Kills all of them.
Yeah.
I tell people for the deer, bear, and moose, 270 on up. Just doesn't matter what you get, 270 up.
I recommend, because you and I both guide moose hunters, and a lot of times people put in for their wives and kids because they're just hoping to get a moose permit, right? So I can't tell you the number of times over the years that somebody, their kid or their wife got drawn, and so they want to know, well, what would you recommend that's big enough to bring up to Maine and something that they could use, the rest of their life or whatever. And my first recommendation is always a 7mm 08.
Yeah.
It's easy to get ammo for. And if you want to, when they first start out, and they're probably enough for deer, but You can get 125 grain bullets to start them shooting until they get used to the recoil. And then when they come up on their moose hunt, you can get 160 grain bullets for it or whatever. But I think a 7mm08 is a good starting point, and it's something they can use the rest of their life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good one. Just a 308 neck down a little bit. And then Remington makes those, they call reduced recoil.
Yeah, those are the 125s, yeah.
Yeah, they don't kick at all. Good for a kid. So, yeah. Hi, Hal here, host of the Big Woods Bucks podcast. We're excited to announce our partnership with the most respected and recognized land company in the Northeast, Christmas and Associates Land Company. Owners Dan and Mark Christmas are two upstate New York natives with deep roots in the Adirondacks and Tug Hill Plateau, as well as two of the most passionate big woods hunters you'll meet. Whether it's newly constructed camp surrounded by state wilderness or family getaway, their team of experienced land guides are the best at matching folks with a perfect land track at an affordable price. They even provide financing. Christmas Land Guides will provide full land tours using ATVs, snowmobiles, and even snowshoes so that you can scout every acre. Christmas Land and Camp staff also help you construct the camp you've always dreamed of using our in-the-house master builders. For over 35 years, no one in New York State has provided more big buck properties and family hunting camps to hundreds of folks who love the woods than Christmas and Associates Land Company. Dan and Mark and the whole company remain dedicated to wise land conservation and treating everyone they meet like family. Always available 7 days per week unless there's fresh tracking snow. Call 800-229-7843 or visit Land and Camps on Facebook or go to landandcamps.com. Okay. Next question was, I know you cut your grandson's rifle down to carbine length. I'm curious about doing this myself. Do most of the guys on the team do this? Do some shoot them at standard length, 22 inches. Some calibers respond better. No, I think the reason to cut those 760s, 7600s is because it's basically the balance point, right? The rifled one, 22 inches, it's just end heavy when you try to carry it. You shorten the barrel up to 18 and a half and it lugs perfectly. And obviously it's a little bit less length to jam through the brush when you're walking, but that's a personal preference. I know a lot of people lug the rifles and they like them fine. But the carbine definitely lugs a lot better, and it doesn't affect the accuracy cutting them down. You know, if you get them cut by, a professional that knows how to cut them and crown them, because they got to recrown the barrel and stuff, and if they do that right, there's no difference in the accuracy.
Yeah. If we talked about that on the way up, if you live in the Northeast and New England area like we do, Kevin at TGI, he does a good job, and you've had him cut a bunch of yours. Yeah. So just make sure you go to somebody that's, that we'd recommend. I tell people this is another thing. It goes back to calibers. A 308 and a 270 and a 30-06, if anything, they're more than you need for deer. They got plenty of power. And if you cut it from 22 inches back to 18 and a half, that 3.5 inches of barrel, it's probably going to be going 100 or maybe a little more feet per second slower in the carbine, but it really doesn't matter because it's still enough. So I think it's a personal preference too, and it doesn't matter how you're built because you're taller and longer armed than I am, and I carry both the carbines and the rifles. But for me personally, the rifles don't bother me. But if you want to have the carbine, don't worry about how much velocity loss or if you're going to lose any accuracy. If somebody does it right, it's fine.
Yeah. Some people get too hung up on ballistics. You don't even think about ballistics because, and I know a lot of you guys out there, you hand load and all that, and you're trying to work up the best load. It's basically totally irrelevant in the woods. You're not shooting. Your odds of ever shooting one beyond 100 yards is somewhere between slim and none up in this country.
Yeah.
So ballistics doesn't really matter. Yeah, work it up, whatever you want, but don't worry about trying to get the right powder combination, and don't try to. A lot of people want to hand load and move stuff as fast as they can. That may become counterproductive actually in the woods. You want a bullet that'll get down through the brush and get its job done. You don't need nothing going at 3,000, 3,200 feet per second to get that job done, you know?
Yeah. Most everything that we kill, I'm almost 60 and you're almost 70, and I bet you probably 90% of everything we've killed up in Maine, we probably killed at 100 yards or less, right? So it's really irrelevant.
I've shot only the furthest that I ever shot a buck ever, and that's counted. We hunted a lot of clear cuts out there in Ontario, was 125 paces. Now, I had another one, that Fathorn one I shot. I know it was a long way because it was way down in the hardwoods, and the bead covered most of its body. But I never did pace it. It was down over the ridge, and I never thought about it. But the one that was 120, the reason I actually, after I shot, and I see him hump up and go down, I said to myself, that was a long ways away. I'm going to pace that off, or I probably never would have done that anyway. So it ended up being 120 paces down through the hardwoods. But, I mean, that's rare. You know, I know some guys shoot them up here around, they might see one in a clear cut or whatever down the road or something. But though the odds are so slim about doing that you don't need to work up your loads or think about shooting long range, you know.
Some guys do, but if you follow big woods, you know, most of us are all in the same boat. We've all killed most of our deer at 100 yards or less. And one thing that I'd mentioned to go along with that too is when you're sighting your gun in, it's fine to shoot off a bench. You know, make sure that your gun is shooting as good as it can. So when you sight it in, shoot it off the bench. But don't be afraid after your gun's sighted in and ready to go to stand up on your hind legs and shoot at something at 50 to 75 yards, and just make sure if you can hit an 8-inch pie plate at 75 yards consistently, just standing up and racking them and shooting them, you're probably going to be ready, right?
You'll be more ready than the guy that takes 30 seconds to shoot a shot off a bench rest.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about practice, and like Hal said, it's where you hit them. And again, everybody's going to have a difference of opinion on this, but you got to find something that works for you. But I can tell you mostly from bear season and moose season, that guys come with big guns and they don't shoot them enough, or they're more worried about, you know, that they shot a 1-inch group off the bench. That stuff all goes out the window, because we've had all kinds of guys on the moose hunt and on the bear hunt that, yeah, it's not really a hard shot, but when the time comes, they don't make it because they don't have the right preparation.
Yeah, they're not quick enough, and you know, you got to be able to get a shot off pretty quick if you're gonna. Sometimes that's all you got. It's a split second or a second or two.
Yeah. I always tell people, and I'm sure you feel the same way when I'm guiding my moose hunters, if they're from Pennsylvania or New York, which over the years I've had the majority of my moose hunters that I've guided over the years have been from Pennsylvania or New York, because it's like the closest place they can come and shoot something bigger than deer. And New York and Pennsylvania is full of hunters, right?
Right.
So I've guided a lot of guys from Pennsylvania and New York. And if they're asking me, well, geez, should I go out and buy something for a bigger gun for moose? And I'm like, what do you hunt deer with? If they tell me they hunt deer with a 308 and a 30-06, I tell them, bring that for your moose hunt.
I tell them the same thing.
I want you to shoot the gun that you're used to shooting and you shoot all the time, and it's big enough. You put 180 grain 30-06 or 308, if you put it where you're supposed to on the moose, you'll be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you want a bullet because the deer are big, or if you're shooting at a bear or moose, but even with the deer, I've always I started with core locks when I was little, and I still use core locks, and that's the way I am. I mean, obviously, since then, since the 60s, there's been a lot of bullets made, and there's a lot of good bullets, but just get one that's not a target bullet, you know, more something that's bonded, I guess they call them, or something that's going to hold together. The other good one is those Vortex, you know, especially for moose. They really hold together good, and that's a good bullet in the woods. I still have my aversion to it's just psychological to me, to a pointed bullet for deer hunting. I don't know what it is because I've always used the round nose, you know.
Well,
I know most people do use a pointed one. In some calibers, like Ryland has to use a 150 grain pointed soft point core locks in his 300 Savage because it's all they make.
Right.
So stuck with them and
I was going to say that's the same thing. A lot of calibers now, because you got to remember they're marketing to the whole U.S. and out west they want a pointed bullet because they're going to be shooting further or whatever. It's actually hard to get round nose bullets now in some calibers. Yeah,
well, the funny part is people get, like I said, a lot of people analyze too much. There wasn't even, I don't think, a pointed bullet till the 60s, was it? Or 70s. They were all round nose before that.
Yeah, probably some. I mean, they started doing them in military guns back before then, you know. But I think, I can remember Tommy Giroux, him and his family, they all hunt with a 99 Savage, 300 Savage, and they always use the 180 grain Remington core locks.
Round nose.
Tommy told me once, he said he went into some place and told him he wanted 300 Savage. They gave him the 150 grain pointed because it's all there was. And he said, I don't want them pointy things. I want some round nose.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, we get stuck on our stuff. Can you discuss the pros and cons of different rifle calibers? Yep. We already did that. Bullet weights. This guy, Todd's got a lot of good questions. You shoot the heaviest bullets. We kind of discussed that. No, you don't. We didn't talk about that, but we don't. He was asking if we shoot the heaviest bullet you can get for that caliber. And I don't, because you can get a 220 for an .6, but they don't feed right. And you don't really, it's not, I shouldn't say it's counterproductive, but in the pumps, they don't feed as good. So, and every caliber has an optimum bullet weight, right?
Yeah, they claim that for 30 caliber, it's 165 to 180.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think in the 270, you could always used to get 130s and 150s. Yeah. I don't know how much difference that makes, but probably not a lot. But
yeah, I think one of the things when we're talking about the 30-06 and using the 180s instead of the 220s, it's the same thing in my 35 Wayland. I've shot some gigantic moose, and most people would say, well, in the 35 Wayland on moose, you should use the 250s. But I'm going to tell you, the 250s, they knock the snot out of you. Yeah. And the 200s are plenty. I've shot 2 huge moose with the 200s, and it's enough.
Yeah, because you got to think about it. When the bigger caliber you get, the more lead and the heavier it is anyway. So, you could be shooting a 45-70 with a 325 grain bullet, and it's still way more lead than a 250 grain, 35 Wayland.
Right.
So I think it's apples and oranges or splitting hairs, but I don't think the heaviest bullet weight for a caliber is really useful.
And different bullets are made to expand at different velocities too. Yeah. And so that's something you always want to, that's why I think I might've mentioned this before, but I sat down, had a long conversation with Craig Boddington, who won the Weatherby Award a few years ago. I mean, that guy shot literally thousands of critters.
Yeah.
And if you want to, I shoot some nozzle petitions, and I've shot some Barnes, all copper X bullets. And a lot of times on the moose hunt now, the guys bring those Barnes X bullets, which is fine. They hold together good. But I can remember Craig Boddington telling me that his favorite bullets for deer, he called them POBs, plain old bullets. Yeah. And he was talking about Remington core locks and Winchester, ammo. Winchester, they used to have silver tips. Now I think I can't remember what they call them. But
I remember back when I was a kid, that was about the only bullets you had. You either had Winchester silver tips or Remington Corlocks. I mean, that's what everybody had, Yeah.
And
then shortly after that, I don't know when Federal started, but it was quite a ways back. But I don't know if it was the 70s or.
And again, the bullets are made like in a 30-06 and a 308. Those 180 grain bullets that they load in those, they're made to expand at the 308 and 30-06 velocity. So you actually, they used to call it, remember they called it the deadliest mushroom in the woods.
Yeah.
And they would show one of those Corlocks fully expanded but holding together. They'd lose some of their weight. But again, that's not a bad thing, because when they're losing some of that weight in the lungs or whatever, that's a separate projectile that's still doing a lot of damage. But back when I used to cut a lot of deer up before I ran the guide business, I used to cut a lot of deer up. And a lot of times those Remington Corlocks, if you shoot them right through the shoulders on a 308 or an 06 or even the 30-30, they'll punch through both of them shoulders, and then you find that bullet right under the hide on the offside. That's just what you want.
Yeah, it's used up all its energy, and it's done its job, and they're usually perfectly. I've pulled a lot of my own out of there, and a lot of times that's what happens there. They went through. A lot of people think you got to blow right through them, and it's not the best thing to blow right straight through. You want the bullet to do the damage inside.
Yeah.
Whatever the energy is, if it gets expended inside, that's it. That's how you're going to kill something. All right. I'm assuming a .22 rifle in the same action as a preferred deer rifle with the same sight setup would be an excellent or cheaper way. Yes, exactly right. So you can get pump 22s, you can get some old ones, you can get some newer ones too, but the Remington makes them. Winchester always did. In the pumps, the bolt action the same way. You can get a 22 bolt action if that's what you shoot. You can get the lever action 22s. We had those Henry's done there a few years ago. The little, what do we call them? The rabbit trackers. We called them, yeah.
Yeah, if you hunt with a Winchester 94 or a Marlin 336, it makes a lot of sense. Marlin used to make, and Winchester, they used to make 22s, but I'm going to tell you, those things are expensive now, just because they haven't made them for a few years, and you're going to pay as much or more for one of those 94 22s, or the Marlins were called 39s. But the Henry, it looks just like the Winchester 94 22. They're not that much money. And I want to tell you, they shoot those rabbit trackers. I bought a couple of those for me and Steven and the boys. And boy, those things, Andy's got looks like a little miniature Skinner Peep sight on those rabbit trackers.
Yeah.
And the adjustment is really easy on them. And those things shoot like a house of fire. I couldn't believe how good. At 50 yards, they'll drive tacks at 50 yards, and it's a cheap way to, you can have your kids start shooting them when they're 6 or 8 years old and get them geared up and ready for when they're old enough to hunt.
That's what I did with Ryland. I got one of those little metal spinner things. It's got the big plate, not big, but there's one that's probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 inches, and another one that might be 4 or 5 inches, and it spins when you can shoot either one, and it spins. And a few years back there, when he's 10 years old, or whenever we got those, I took him out there and just set down a box of 500 of them Remington 22s, and just let him shoot as long as he wanted to, Yeah, but that is a good way to practice, and it's a cheap way. And so, yeah.
And it gets them used to, like if you get I like the old Remington 121s. If you're, I would say the majority of big woods guys, they're going to be using a Remington pump, right? If you can get a hold of one of those Remington 121, 22 pumps,
or the 12s.
The safety, the 12s are even older.
Yeah.
It's a little, I think it's a little easier to get the 121s, but regardless, they both are built similar. I mean, it's a pump action. The safety is similar on the trigger guard.
Yeah.
And it's good muscle memory for the kids to have the same safety and the same action
Yeah.
to shoot. And again, you can buy a brick of 22s and let the kids shoot all. I think we're going to start Stevens boys. We're going to start them really young shooting those 22s, even before they're old enough to hunt. But if you get them, used to shooting, I think that's a good way to spend some time with your grandkids and get them ready for when they are old enough to hunt.
Yeah. Just make it fun. Make a game out of it. So, yes. Good thought there, Todd. It's a good question. It's a way to do it. All right. Now he asks, in regards to slings on a rifle, as I'd noticed you don't do one, I think he's referring to me since he sent this to me. Does it make sense to sling your gun while looking for tracks, or long walks, when dragging out a deer, and you could remove your sling? Yeah, that's right. So I think we've discussed this before, but I don't use a sling. Some people do. I know the Benoits always do. They had a way they carried their gun upside down with a sling. It's the only thing, the reason I never did was because it was something to get caught in the brush. Because you can't think about a sling here as like walking in the open country in the Midwest or out west where you're not tangled up in anything. But when you're trying to get in, close in on a buck there, he might be laying in his bed and he might be over the next hill. One little snap or one little mistake, and if you got a sling hanging down there and you're going along and just one stick gets caught in that and snaps, it's probably game over. You know what I mean? So, again, that's one of them things that, I look at it as cutting your odds back by having it on, but you can take it on and off if you want. It is a good idea if you want to get out, if you're getting out late at night, if you got a sling in your pack, if you want to carry one, probably a good idea. But just in the woods in general, I don't really like them. It's me, like I'm kind of anal about some things, and that's one of the things I'm anal about. If I had hunters, I didn't in the beginning, and then after a few hang-ups and snaps where the guys got their sling hung up in the brush, I started making them for deer hunting, not for moose or anything, but for deer hunting. If they had a sling, I'd have them take it off and put it in their pack and get it out if we got a drag. It's a good idea for that, but all I do is carry that piece of nylon cord I sling over the barrel and the pistol grip, throw it over my shoulder if I need to. But
almost all guns now, if they come with the swivel studs, the swivels are all, easily detachable now. All I do with mine is, it's the lightest one I could find. It's a nylon strap that's just long enough to fit over my shoulder.
Yeah.
And it's got detachable sling swivels. I keep that in my pack. The only time I ever use it is if I'm by myself and I get a deer and I'm dragging, I end up, then I can sling it. But that's the only time I ever use one. And I'm the same way. Again, I'm sure that if people aren't used to hunting the way that we do, a lot of times when we're tracking deer, if those deer know that you're on them and they've been chased before, they head to a fur thicket, right?
Yeah.
Or they head to a regen. And when you're going through that stuff, I don't care what anybody says. Now, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but I can tell you from 50 years of hunting, when they go through that regen and them fur thickets, I don't want to sling on it because it's something to catch and fetch you up. I'd rather have just as slim and easily to get through that stuff as I can. That's why I do that too.
Okay, now, about half the people listening are going, what the heck is regen?
That's one of those old cuts that, they end up, when they're coming back, if it's a old fir and spruce cut that's been cut 20 years ago or whatever, and it's coming back up.
It's regenerating.
Regenerating.
It's regenerating, so it's regen, yeah. And it's thick and nasty, and
Bucks love it.
yeah, they like it. It's good cover, so yeah. But with the slings, you can get them now. Back in the day, they were all leather, and some of them were padded, and they were wide up here. They're quite a big sling. Nowadays, if you just get them little nylon straps, slings, and throw it in your pack, And I probably would carry one of them in my pack if my gun had sling
Studs on it.
swivels on it, but I'm not going to put them on. I carry my nylon, and it's good enough. But
Right.
if you wanted to think about it that way, well, coming out, you could carry it or whatever. Just get a little nylon webbing sling and stick it in your pack and use it when you need it.
I know we wanted to know about Peep sights. We haven't covered that yet.
Yeah, let's see. That's the next question, Lee. You must have memorized this when you looked over it.
Well, I did. I
with your
did my 1,900 words a minute, and with the 90% comprehension, so I know where you're headed.
Yep, I know. Does anyone on the team that uses Peep sights change apertures for conditions? I get a running shot, ghost ring while walking. Would you screw in a smaller one? Okay, for accuracy. And what's your thoughts on that? So
I'll answer that first. The only time that I have one of those apertures in is I might, when I'm sighting a new rifle in, I might have one of those apertures in just to make the hole a little smaller when I'm sighting it in. But then I take it out and I never hunt with it because, again, you're shooting it, you're pointing and shooting like a shotgun, and you're basically just focusing on that front bead. And we've talked about this before, how your eye automatically wants to center it in that ghost ring. Now, when we had Andy Larson, his original Peep sights that he had, they have places for screw-in apertures, but our Bigwood sight is just a big hole that...
that's what I told him when we
use.
talked to him about when he started making those for the 760s, when we got together with him, because he had sent me one to look at it, and even with you'd either call it the smallest or the biggest hole aperture he had was still way too restrictive. So I took that out and I looked at the threaded hole, and even that was too restrictive. So we just basically had him drill it out. I told him, Andy, drill the threads out of it into a ghost ring, and then that will be, then we can use that, and we'll call it the Big Woods Tracker Sight because it's open enough. A lot of people don't realize too, and he mentioned in the question here, long range, would you put it in? You got to get the long range hunting out of you. When you're hunting up in the woods, there's no really such thing as long range. So that's not a consideration. The biggest consideration really is short range, where an aperture is going to exclude your target. In other words, the sight is going to cover a lot of your animal, where if you're trying to like swing on a deer through that Peep sight, it's blocking out most of the deer. You can't see it really good because you're at too close for range. So that's the thing. When you're thinking about long range, forget it, because you're going to be probably shooting 90% of the time under 50 yards, 90%. So don't even consider about changing apertures for long range. Use a ghost ring, and then it's fast. And the other part about those ghost rings is you can see through them in the dim light.
I got a really good story to share with you. It happened this year because we have a bear business, and you would think that people, how do I want to put this? We think that everybody is like us and they know what they're doing, but people that don't get to hunt all the time like us and they haven't had an experience, if you don't tell them the difference, they don't know it yet. We had a guy showed up with it was his grandfather's. It was a custom 98 Mauser 270 with a Mannlicher style stock, beautiful rifle. And it had a really nice, I don't remember if it was a Redfield or a Lyman, but Peep sight on it. And when we sighted it in, we always have him shoot at a bear at 40 or 50 yards or whatever, which is the longest any of our bear sights are. He did fine with it because we shoot it usually like 11 o'clock in the morning before we're going to go out, and he did fine. Well, probably 2 or 3 nights into it, we had a bait site, and we had a 400-pound bear that was coming into that. And we had some smaller ones. And I think he'd seen the smaller bears and didn't want to shoot them. But the first night that big bear came in, he said he pulled up and he couldn't see the bear. And he pulled down and he could see the bear, and then he pulled up, couldn't see the bear. So when he told me that, I never even thought to think, to check his Peep sight, but he had a target aperture in that Peep sight, and it had a little dinky hole in it, which, when he was shooting, when he sighted it in or when he shot at his bear during daylight, he could see fine. But and it was a beautiful big bear. We had it on camera. It was a 400-pound bear. It came in like 20 minutes or a half hour left of legal time. I mean, it would have been easy. Normally, them big ones, they don't come in that early, but he couldn't shoot because he had that little dinky target aperture, and it cost him a bear because he couldn't see it. When he'd pull up in that low light, couldn't see anything.
Yeah. I always told my bear hunters when they were either booking or talking about it or whatever, that open sights are actually a disadvantage for bear. To me, they're an advantage for deer, a Peep sight. But for bear, the scope's better because
you can see longer.
In the woods, with open sights or a Peep sight, you're not even going to get within 15 minutes of legal shooting time. Yeah. And that's usually, a good, a lot of bears are shot in that last 15 minutes. But so, yeah, get your ghost ring and that's all you'll need. Don't think about changing apertures and all that. Getting too much in the weeds again when you think about that stuff.
One thing that we didn't touch on that kind of goes along with that, and I think it bears repeating, is a lot of guys now are putting on fiber optic sights. And a lot of times when you buy like the new muzzleloaders, they got fiber optic, and that's fine. But one thing that you want to think about is, again, if the majority of people, if you're using a 99 Savage or a 760 pump or whatever, if you're using the Skinner Peep sight or the Williams Peep sight, when you put a lot of those fiber optic front sights, they're bigger than the bead that comes on your gun. So if you're shooting more than 75 yards, those fiber optic sight, they cover up about half your deer at 75 yards. That's something to think about. Now, a lot of my guns, if I put fiber optic sights on some of them, but I like the small. You can get different sizes. If you get a fiber optic, I like the smaller ones because those big fat ones cover up too much of your deer too, I think. But I've always told people, if you don't want to put a fiber optic on, or, if you're thinking about it, if you just take women's fingernail polish, they've got fluorescent orange, fluorescent green and stuff. If you just buy a bottle of that, it'll last you the rest of your life, and just keep touching up your front bead with that. That's always worked good for me.
Yeah. I started out with that back before they had all these fancy bright colored fingernail polish. I found some model paint, and this was probably back in the 80s. They had fluorescent orange model paint, but the paint was a kind of a flat model paint. Used to be a lot of them were almost like a flat finish. So I'd put the paint on, I'd dab it on, I'd break a Q-tip in half and just use the stick part of it and put it on there. And then I'd put clear fingernail polish over it to help harden it. But once I seen a bottle of fluorescent orange fingernail polish, I had to have it. And if I always touch mine up before the season, but you got to be careful with that, is because if you hook your bead on anything like a whippet or something going through them, you can strip that off pretty easy. It gets caught, because the bead sticks back. You don't want too big of a booger on it. Yeah, it'll strip it right off. So, but it's easy enough. You get home that night and put another dab on. I put 2 to start with the fingernail polish. I'll put 1 dot and let it dry. Then I'll just thicken it up a little bit.
That's the same thing I do. I wonder why we come to these same conclusions.
Because we're in our right mind.
That must be it. I do the same thing. Yeah. If I get a new gun, I put 1 dab of fluorescent orange fingernail polish. I let it dry a little bit, put another dab, and I'm good to go.
You're good till it falls off. All right. Have you ever experimented with Peep installed in the barrel dovetail rather than the receiver. For those of us with older rifles that's not drilled and tapped, I believe the Skinner has now called a Speed U that has a slot cut out of it. Wondering if this helps. So he hates to drill an old classic, which a lot of people probably do now because those old guns they don't make anymore. So I got a story about that. Probably told it before, but when Billy Moles come up and hunted with me, he had his grandfather's. That's what he wanted to deer hunt with, his 303 Savage, right? And just has the original buckhorn, and then he missed that buck. Well, probably it was a far shot anyways. That was one of the times, that's the furthest I ever had anybody shoot at a gun, at a deer, because we got to the edge of a cut and it was across the other side, and he happened to see it and get a shot at it. But after he got home, he asked me he wanted to put a Peep sight on. And I said, so I got a hold of Andy at Skinner there, and they do make one for that dovetail slot. Yep. So I'm sure those dovetails, I think, are about all the same, aren't they?
Yep. Once in a while you find an oddball one, especially on 22s, but almost every one of them is the same.
3/8 or something they call them. 3/8? Yeah, I think they're 3/8 dovetails. But anyways, so Skinner makes one that goes into if you've got an older rifle, whether it's a Sit 99 or a Winchester, anything that you knock the sight out of the dovetail, the rear sight, you can knock one of those in. So Billy got one of them.
Yeah,
so
good.
He's going to be all ready for this year.
What I did with my 99 Savage, and people that have watched my videos and seen them, I've had a ton of people ask me about it. But again, this works good for me, is I might get one of those 99 Peeps that goes in the dovetail. But the 99A, that's the model that I hunt with most of the time, whether it's a 308 or the 250. What I did was I got a old Winchester sight. It's actually a Marbles, but it came off a 94 Winchester, and it's got a long shank on it. So the rear sight comes back all the way back to the receiver, because where the dovetail
gets it closer to your eye.
Gets it closer to your eye. And I hate those buckhorns, because we already talked about it. Those buckhorns cover up what you're shooting at. All mine is just it's a little shallow, like a U with one little hole in it. So I just bring down my front sight until it just touches that hole, and I can see good. Because as I've gotten older and my eyesight isn't as good, I like a scope once in a while. If I come to a clear cut, or if I'm going through some open hardwoods and I stop to have my sandwich or whatever, some people don't like them because they don't think they'll hold zero. The ones that I have do, but I've got loopholed and Weaver detachable mounts, so I'll carry just a little small compact scope in my pack, and sometimes I clip those on. So most of the time, I'm just carrying around my 99 with open sights or a Peep sight, but I've got them set up with mounts, so if I want to put a scope on them, I can.
Yeah. The only thing about that is you just got to remember it's almost critical to have a ghost ring, no aperture, because that's far enough away from your eye. I mean, you almost can't see through it, quickly. Yeah. That would be designed if you was going to shoot in the open, you had time to, make your shot. But in the woods, that's going to be critical to have no aperture in that one, so you can get lined up quickly and shoot. But so that's an option. You don't have to drill and tap them. And
he told me eventually he's going to try to. I talk with Andy quite a lot, and he's going to try to make a Skinner Peep sight for the Savage 99 that uses your back two scope holes.
He is going to work on that. That would be an improvement. But I think I think what Toddy is talking about, and Billy's was the same way, it's not tapped. Some of those Savages weren't.
Yep. But the early ones, before they didn't start putting the scope holes on the very top of the receiver until the 50s. But even the ones like from the 20s that I've got a bunch of Savages from the 1920s. They had 2 screw holes in the back for those old aperture.
Oh, that's right too. So, the old Peeps, yeah.
Yep. So they're talking about, making some that go on those holes too. That way you're not drilling any extra holes in them.
Andy's always coming up with good stuff.
He comes up with good stuff all the time. I got to tell you, I talked with Andy when he gave us those 1-6 scopes. I can't remember what I put it on. I think I put it on that 360 buck hammer that they sent us. But they're a 30 millimeter. They're not even a 1-inch diameter like old scopes were. A 30 millimeter, which is bigger. And they're 1-6, and they were a big 1-6. But the scope was pretty big and pretty heavy. Really nice quality and everything. But I thought, man, that's too big. And so I had mentioned to him, and I'm sure other people did too, if you had like a little 1-4 compact, something that was smaller and lighter and everything, because we're all about smaller and lighter. So he sent me one of those. Like I said, that's what I carried this year. I had that little 1-4 compact on my 99. Didn't add hardly any extra weight to it. And I carried it on 2-power all the time. I shot my buck running with that 2-power and didn't have any trouble picking it up and shooting it.
All right. Good conversation. We got through all of Todd's questions. We appreciate him sending those in. So, like we said, if any of you's got other topics you'd like us to talk about, we probably can.
Sounds like a plan.
We're the old guys. We've been around a while. We've seen a few things.
Little. That's one thing about guiding. I tell people all the time that I would have shot more deer if I hadn't been guiding, but I'm a better deer hunter and guide because I did guide.
There's no question. That's what I always told people. It kept me in the woods for,
5 weeks.
5 weeks of the season for years and years and years, 30 years, and you just accumulate the experience. It might not be you pulling the trigger, but whatever the experience was, you had it, A lot of times we made that experience happen, probably most of the time, but still you learn from a lot of mistakes, and the mistakes are the painful ones sometimes are the ones that you remember the most. You don't forget that stuff.
Well, I've had weeks before where I remember thinking to myself, I'd see a really nice, maybe it was 200, maybe not, but a really nice buck that you'd be willing to pull the trigger on. And if it was just you hunting, you'd have killed that buck and then your season would have been over, right? Where because I was guiding somebody, I couldn't tell you the amount of seasons where I've been guiding people where we'd see more than one big buck in a week. And again, if it was just you and I hunting, we'd be done on the first one. But because you're bringing somebody out and trying to get it
Lee,
for 'em.
my record is 5.
Oof.
I watched 5 in 1 week get away. Yeah, and I'm like, every one of them I could have shot. And they all got away without even a shot being fired. Yeah. So,
But that's all part of it.
it's part of it. We got the experience, and we still have that picture in our minds of those bucks and stuff.
And I think about it as you get older, your memories become more important to you. And I've told everybody here, you and Scott and Paul, that that podcast that we did about my dad was so, I think the word's cathartic, but it was so good for me to just relive all the memories. And it's the same thing with guiding people. I have got so many crazy memories of stuff that's happened, taking people out hunting that I wouldn't have experienced if I had a regular job.
Yeah. Well, anyways, let's wrap it up. Also I forgot in the beginning, I said we were up here in northern Maine. I got to give the shout out to Paul for hosting us up here, and remind people to check out his podcast too. Click on that, subscribe. The Maine Outdoor Enthusiast. He does a lot with his father and talks about northern Maine stuff, or Maine stuff in general. So anyway, once again, thanks for tuning in, and make sure you click the dinger to subscribe and support our sponsors, and we'll keep at it and talk about the stuff you want to hear. So until next time, good luck on the trail.